Hey, thanks for stopping by. Robert Kofed with Computer Creations. Today's video sponsor is Hawaiian Laser. I'm going to cover 4 topics today. We're going to talk a little bit about how to get you started in photography, whether you have a UV or a fiber. Doing pictures on a lot of different substrates is pretty easy, so I'm going to show you how to get started in that, some of the things that I've learned of owning both machines, give you some settings to start with. This is a 15-watt UV, so everybody knows what we're playing with today. I've also got a 210 lens that I've got in here. We're also using a small honeycomb tray that I purchased at the time of the laser. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the basics of photography, how to engrave some photos on some black business cards, what you've got to do in order to engrave on black surfaces like black business cards or slate. We're going to talk a little bit about the Wobble command in LIGHTBurn. It's a command that you use when you want to cut thin metals, whether it's either a fiber or a UV. And the nice thing about it is you can make some really nice products. I made these, or I should say my wife made these earrings out of the shapes that I cut out, and you'll see that happen today. So using the Wobble command and cutting shapes out of black aluminum business cards can be a lot of fun. So I'm going to give you some settings to get started there and kind of how to approach it. We're also going to talk a little bit about focus when it comes to different products, primarily glass. I've only had the laser about a month or so, and what I have found is I use one focus stick for everything else except glass. Glass has a slightly different focus depth, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into it. But what I will tell you, it's not the same as the focus that you see illustrated on the side of your head of your laser. So focus is going to be pretty critical today. We're going to talk a little bit about how to approach that. We're going to talk about the cylinder correction mode in LIGHTBurn. That's going to be at a very high level, but it's something that if you're doing something stationary and it's got some kind of a taper to it, it can really help you out in getting those graphics to show up properly on something that's tapered. So let's jump into LIGHTBurn and get started. Okay, let's jump into LIGHTBurn and get some basics out of the way when it comes to engraving pictures on a Galvo type machine. The first big thing that you got to understand is when you go to File and you go to Import, this is typically how you're going to want to bring in your image. You can actually drag the image directly onto the desktop here and it will load it, or you can go to File, Import, and then go select your image that you want. And there's 2 different kinds of images that LIGHTBurn will accept, and they act completely differently based on whether they are a PNG or a JPEG. So let's talk for a few minutes about the differences between the 2. First of all, a PNG is a picture, and for the most part, most PNGs will have a transparent background, meaning that you can see that there's nothing behind this bobcat. There's no white background that you would typically see like on this JPEG, where you're going to have this white background that's pretty standard on all JPEGs. And the reason why you want to understand the difference between those 2 is if you're going to be engraving on something dark like a piece of slate or a black aluminum business card, what's going to happen is this white portion is going to engrave, whether you like it or not. There's no way to get rid of it. And so normally, unless you're engraving the entire black business card, you want to import your image as a PNG with a transparent background, and that way the only thing that's being engraved is just your subject. So you can take a JPEG into a third-party photo software, eliminate the background, and export it as a PNG, bring it in, and engrave it. You won't have this background. You might know or understand that when you're engraving on a piece of wood, like you can with the UV, it will ignore this white background. So if you're engraving on wood, whether it's a CO2 laser or a UV laser, this white background typically is ignored, where it's not on something black like slate or a black aluminum business card. So just wanted to give you a little background on the differences between a PNG and a JPEG. If you know the differences between those two, it can really help you a lot. Now, the next thing that I wanted to make sure you understood is when you bring in your image, you want to make sure that it is adjusted properly. And so what you can do when you bring in your image, it doesn't matter whether it's a PNG or a JPEG, while it's selected, you can right mouse click and come down here to adjust image. And when that comes out, the portion on your left is going to be for the original and the portion on the right is going to be after adjustments. And one of the first things that you're going to want to do if you're engraving on anything black, like slate or a black business card, is you're going to want to invert your image, because you're going to want to take what normally is dark and turn it to light. So you got to invert your image and it'll show like this. But the other nice thing about LIGHTBurn is you can go ahead and re-invert the display. So it's still inverted. It will export the display. But this way you can kind of see what it's going to actually look like. Okay? And so this is before, this is after. And so you can make your adjustments based on this. And what I will tell you, based on the pictures you get, the higher quality a picture that you have, the better image you're going to get that's going to be engraved. If it's just a social media picture that's been stepped on a lot and it's very low resolution, it's not going to come out very good. So high resolution images are really a great way to start. If you don't have any, there's lots of high resolution images on the web. You can go out, find yourself one, download it, and practice that way. So high resolution images are a must. So right mouse click, go down to adjust image. It's going to be before, after. You can invert the display so you can see what's going on. What I will tell you when you're doing pictures, usually you're going to want to enhance the sharpness a little bit, especially if it's just a normal photo. This is a very high def photo to begin with, so I'm not going to have to sharpen it much. Most just your average photos, you're going to want to go ahead and add both enhance radius and the amount. These two sliders are to add sharpening, and you can see how much more sharp it adds. And so you got to be careful there, because it will, most lasers love contrast, and this is a great way to get contrast. Okay, so sharpening there. The other thing that I will tell you that makes a big difference when it comes to doing work on your UV is adding or subtracting gamma. And what I mean by that is if you go ahead and add gamma, you're going to see that I'm going to be able to richen up this image. So if you go with the settings that I'm going to propose, and your image is just way too light, it doesn't have a lot of contrast, you'll want to go ahead and start adding gamma, and you can see how much richer that is now compared to what it was back here. So you can see that the benefits of adding gamma. It richens it up, especially on metal. If you're doing engraving on metal, adding or subtracting gamma can make a big difference. So focus and gamma are going to be two of your biggies. Let's talk a little bit about some other settings that you're going to need to know about when you're going to do a picture on your Galvo machine. So we're going to jump back into adjust image. And so usually the mode, there is lots of different ways to do pictures. And so this is just one way of doing pictures. But typically I like to either do Stucky or Jarvis as the two processing image mode selections that you'll have. So Stuckey or Jarvis. Use, bounce back and forth, see which one gives you the best image. And here's the other thing that I can't emphasize enough, is the DPI that your image is set at. One of the biggest mistakes most people make is adding way too much DPI to their image. If I took this image and put it up at 600 or 1200, whatever it would be, even though the UV is very, very small, has incredible detail, what you'll have to do is if you jump up this DPI to much higher, your settings change, and in some cases it actually looks worse, not better, again, depending on the type of photo you have. So this is just a great starting point. 317, 318 is typically where I start, which gives you a 0.080 line interval. That's a great place to start. And go from there and work down, work up. And again, depending on your image and the product you're putting it on will determine kind of what's best. Here's one of the other things that I will show you when it comes to images that you'll want to pay attention to. And this one thing really makes a big difference in the quality of your photo, I've found. So I'm going to open my image settings back up. Most of the time I'm running right around 200 millimeters per second. I've got a frequency of 80, a Q pulse of 8, and you notice here that it's a negative image, bidirectional scanning. I've got Stuckey as my image mode, and there's one other thing down here that I want you to pay attention to, and it's enable dot width adjustment. This really helps take that picture to the next level. And typically the rule of thumb that I like to use is whatever your line interval is. So right now my line interval is 0.08. Usually I like to take my dot width at about 60% of my line interval. So 60% of 0.080 is right around 0.047. And that's a great place to start. Lots of videos out there on YouTube to describe on kind of what this is and how it works. Don't have time in this video to kind of go through all that, but play with these settings because this dot width can really make your image a lot better. So start with like 317, 318 DPI, Stuckey. Your dot width is going to be 60% of whatever your line interval is set at. And just start to play with it. And before you know it, you will be able to create images. Now I'm going to put some images up on the screen here. And you're going to see the image on the left is where I didn't add any gamma at all. The image in the middle is where I added a little bit of, a little bit of gamma, and then the image on the far right is where I added even more gamma. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you the difference between just adding some gamma into your image and how much richer and finished it looks. So give that a try. There's one other thing that I wanted to show you when you're doing pictures. There's a feature in LIGHTBurn where you can create a mask and only engrave just a portion of the photo. Typically what I like to do is focus in on the eyes and the face on a particular animal or person and dial in my settings based on that and not have to worry about spending all the time engraving the entire person, or in this case, the entire animal. So what I've done is I've just drawn a rectangle. I've turned it into a tool layer. I'm going to drag that rectangle over kind of the area that I'm familiar with or that I want to capture. I'm going to hold the Shift key down and I'm going to select the picture itself, right mouse click, and I'm going to apply mask to image. And what that's going to do now is that's going to get rid of everything else. Now I can move this picture around. If I deselect it, I can move this around to get it exactly where I want it from a that this is the area that I want to hone in to dial in my settings. And so it's very easy. And then all you've got to do when you're all done and you're happy with what you've got and you want to go back to the entire photo, you just right mouse click again and remove mask from image, and you're right back to where you were before. So the steps are: create a rectangle, and this can be whatever size you want it to be. It could be just, let's say that you wanted to dial in the eye area because that was the critical part of the process. You could go ahead, put that over the eye, hold the shift key down, select the image. So now you've got both the tool layer and the photo selected. Right mouse click, apply to mask to image, and now you've only got just the eye. So this is the only thing that's going to print out. When you're all done, you can just go ahead and right mouse click it again and remove mask from image, and you're right back to where you started before. So just some tips and tricks on photos. This will get you started. And I think once you do this a couple of times, you'll have a blast. Doing photos on a UV or a fiber laser are really pretty easy. It just takes a little time. I hope you enjoyed the photo portion of this video. The next topic we're going to talk about is the Wobble command. And this feature gives LIGHTBurn the ability to cut thinner metals with both the fiber and the UV. And so what I thought we'd do is we'd make a pair of earrings. So we're going to cut these shapes that I've got here out of the black aluminum business cards. And I just downloaded some simple shapes off of Etsy for earrings, nothing special. I've got two here. They're both about 1 inch tall. It's like 1.25 inches tall. You could pretty much make them whatever size you want. And so let's jump into the parameters of, I want to cut these shapes out of a business card. I'm going to make sure that my mode is in line. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And Wobble is right down here. It's just a little radio button that is normally off. And what Wobble is, I'll put a graphic up here on the screen that shows you what it is. Basically what it is a lot of little bitty circles that move down the line, and it gives you a lot more area to be able to cut out a thinner piece of material. So because Galvo lasers are not optimized for cutting, it's hard to apply enough energy in a straight line. So they apply a circular motion as they go along, and that way they can remove enough material in order for it to cut. And so as you see on the graphic that I've got on the screen, you've got two settings when it comes to Wobble. You've got the step and you've got the size. And so the step size is just how far over it moves after it completes a circle. And then you've got the size itself is truly the circle size. Now what I found is the settings that I'm going to share today work real well for the projects that we're doing today. I would highly encourage you to learn more about the Wobble and how to use it. Each one of these settings, both the step and the size, will affect how long it takes you to make this stuff. But this seems to work out pretty well. It's pretty fast. It's nice and smooth, and it provides a pretty good starting point for settings to make jewelry out of these colored business cards. So I've got my step at 0.05 and my size at 0.10. So my size is twice as big as my step size, but that seems to be kind of the sweet spot, at least for this design with those particular types of cards. And all you're going to do in order to determine what it's going to take is if you can set this up so you can see that I've got 150 millimeters a second. This is on a 15 watt UV laser. Frequency 65, Q pulse of 1, and it's going to take me 7 passes to cut through this business card. Now these are fairly thin business cards, so depending on the thickness of the business cards that you're using will depend on how many passes you need. And what I would highly recommend you do is just do some simple circles at first to determine how many passes it's going to take for you to cut out a shape. Once you have that, then you can go ahead and do something like this, and you might have to fine-tune your number of passes. But literally, that's all it takes. Put in these settings. Again, this is a 15 watt UV, so your settings may have to change depending on if it's a 5 watt or a 10 watt. And put in your step and your size, and start making some earrings. So what we're going to do is we've got our settings done. Our number of passes is going to be 7. We're going to go ahead and fire up the laser and watch these get cut out. Let's jump into the cylinder correction mode. This is primarily used for Galvo lasers. If you've got a straight-walled tumbler that you want to put a design on, what it does is it compensates for the roundness of what you're doing. So you're putting a square design on a rounded object. And because there's a distance involved with your focal plane, it will skew it. And so what this does is this adjusts for that. And so if we come up here to this little barrel looking thing, it's right next to your rotary setup. This is your cylinder correction information. And so what you would do is the first thing that they're asking you for is distance from the mirrors to the top of your engraving surface. And you might wonder, well, how do I know where to measure from? So I thought what I'd do is I'd pull up LIGHTBurn right quick. And this is in the LIGHTBurn help documentation. This is under their cylinder correction, and it's even kind of giving you an example on what cylinder correction does. Basically, what you're doing there is you're wrapping a square design over a cylindrical object, and it adjusts for that. And so if you come down here, right here, what they're telling you, and this doesn't matter whether it's a CO2 Galvo, a fiber, a UV, they basically all have this little tube coming out of the head. And basically what you want to do is you want to measure from the middle of this down to the surface of your engraving area. And that's going to be the measurement that they're going to want right here in the mirror distance. So what they're saying here is this is the center of your mirrors. And for general terms, if you just eyeball the center of this tube and measure down, that's going to get you close enough. And so that's exactly how to measure it. If we go down a little bit further, you're going to see that this is kind of what they're doing. This is uncorrected, this is corrected, and this is what you get as a result. So the bottom line is, depending on the shape of your design, sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on your design and how big your design is going to be on your tumbler or something cylindrical that you're trying to engrave on. And so the other thing that I will tell you that's important that they mention here is when you're engraving on something round like this, and it's a stationary object, meaning that this tumbler is not in a rotary, it's just sitting flat on the bed of the laser, focus is absolutely critical. And what they're illustrating here for you is that you want to be able to put that your focus range right at the top, and so that way that you can engrave all across the top of this tumbler. What I've found, at least with my 210 millimeter lens, I've got about 4 to 5 millimeters worth of depth that I can play with. And so if you've got a very small item that's steep an angle, you're not going to be able to go very far around here. You're going to run out of focal distance. So What you need to do is you could probably determine the depth of your focal by just using the little pointer on your tower. I'll put up a picture right here. And what you can do is you can play with your focus as it's running and mark on that pointer kind of the beginning of your focus and the end of your focus, and that way you'll know about how much focus distance you have. But this is absolutely key to making this work if you're trying to engrave on something cylindrical without using a rotary. And so it will depend on the diameter of your tumbler. It will depend on the lens that you're using and how much depth of field you have. But this is kind of where you want to be, and this is what they're showing you is you don't want to be here, you don't want to be here, you want to be right here, so your engraving area on the top of this tumbler stays within the in focus area for that particular lens. So just keep that in mind. It's fun to play around with, and it's very helpful if you do have a design that needs a little bit of correction, that you know how to do it. And so the only other thing you've got to do is just put in your object diameter and what axis you're doing, either the x-axis or the y-axis, and whether it's a convex shape or a concave shape. And once you do that, you're pretty much good to go. The other thing is it will show you the boundary. So the bottom line is this, it's telling you that don't go outside this boundary, that your cylinder correction is not going to work if it's outside this boundary. And so give that a try. It's just one more thing that if you're trying to put some kind of a design on a cylindrical product and it's just sitting in the bed of your laser, it's possible. And this is a way you can help make sure that your project is successful. Give it a try. Hey, the last thing I wanted to talk about today is focus distance when you're dealing with glass on your UV. One of the things that I struggled with a little bit when I first got this machine is I used the focus measurements on the side of the head along with my ruler. I made some focal sticks, okay, that I measured from basically from the line on the side of the head down to the bottom of the lens, and then did some subtraction and made some focal sticks. And it worked great, except I really couldn't do much with glass. Come to find out that glass, you need to take it out of focus by 2 or 3 millimeters before you really get what you need. And so what I wanted to talk a little bit about is, number one, if you're planning on using or engraving on glass and you've got a UV, and you're trying to use the focus distances that are indicated on the side of the head, that's probably not going to work out real well for you. Go ahead and play with either your manual or your automatic motorized Z and move it up and down. And you can focus glass just like you can with the fiber laser or anything else. What I normally would do is I would just make a long rectangle in LIGHTBurn. I go ahead and make sure that my glass was level to my laser head, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. And then I would run it. I would go ahead and start the job. You want to make sure that you've got your safety glasses on, that kind of stuff, and move your head up and down until you get the brightest of light. And typically that's going to be very close to your sweet spot. And I'm going to bet you that it's going to be 2 to 3 millimeters longer or higher than what your normal focal distance is. And so what I had to do is I had to make a focal stick for glass and a regular focus stick for everything else. And so I just wanted to mention that to folks because I struggled there for a while until I figured out it was the focus that I didn't have dialed in when I was trying to do glass. Once I understood that that you needed to defocus that lens by 2 to 3 millimeters, I started getting beautiful results. One of the other things that I really think is important on glass, especially because it seems like everything else that I've done on this UV laser, focus set it, forget it. It's not that big a deal. But when it comes to glass, you have to be dead on your level in order for it to work real well. And so one of the things that I wanted to bring up that once I corrected, doing glass is a piece of cake anymore. I would, if you don't have one of these, this is a Wixie digital gauge. And what I was doing, I was using just a regular Starrett small level when I was leveling up my glass work and that kind of stuff in the rotaries. And I was still getting inconsistent results. And what I found was that the plane of my head was different than the plane of my base. And remember, when you're focusing, especially on glass, you want to make sure that you're focusing based on the levelness of your head itself. So if I would put this on here, it's 0.0 now, but was actually a full degree off when I got it, and I didn't realize that. And then I would level it here at 0, and what would happen is that some part of my design would not show up. And it wasn't that I was doing anything wrong, it's just that the bed of my laser was at a different level than my level of my head this way. And so once I loosened up these screws on the back, turned this head ever so slightly, and zeroed this out, so now this sits at 0, 0, and this sits at 0, 0, and then I can go ahead and make sure that when I put in my my glass work into my tumblers, my glass work into my rotaries, I can make sure that this reading, whatever this is, and the reading on my glass work is the same, because it really doesn't matter what your base level is. So just remember, when engraving just about anything really, it matters most on what your level is this way. If you're engraving not in the X or the Y, you want to make sure that you turn your Wixie gauge and go this way and make sure that this level is saying the same as this level. And so if you don't have a Wixie digital angle gauge, I would highly recommend you do it. I mean, I've got a good little $35 Starrett level, but what I found, it's just not accurate enough for doing glass, especially glass in rotaries. And so give that a try. Make sure that you find your sweet spot on glass. It looks like to me it's defocused by 2 to 3 millimeters compared to what your true focus is that's illustrated on the side of your head. And give that a try. Buy yourself a digital angle gauge, set it up by those, and I think your results will speak for themselves. I hope this information was helpful. If you haven't, please subscribe. I'd love a thumbs up if you enjoyed the content. And if you have the ability, hit that thanks button and contribute to the channel. It's those contributions that make this content possible. Until next time, thanks and have a great day.